Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. Our victim of the day is Scott Trebilcock. He's the CEO of KORE Mining. This is a company a lot of readers have asked about, and I'm really happy to have somebody to update us. There's been news from drill results in Canada, but they have projects in California, a lot going on. So Scott, why don't you give us an overview of what you're working on, and then I've got questions.
Yeah, absolutely, Lobo. Well, thanks first for having me. KORE is working on really daylighting the fact that KORE has a portfolio of great gold assets. Internally, we believe we have three assets that all carry equal weight and could carry the company. And that includes two assets in California with PEAs and one great large land package with a project on it in BC in the Caribou region. So we're excited about having a portfolio of gold projects to leverage value from going into a great gold market.
Well, that was an admirably pithy summary for a company with millions of ounces of gold out there. But ounces are not all created equal, and
Right.
neither are jurisdictions. So let me ask the first obnoxious question. I'm sure you get a lot, but I have to ask. Two projects in California, that is not most investors' favorite mining jurisdiction. I understand that California has a lot of mining history, but talk to us about California risk, please, and why these projects in California?
Yeah, exactly. Well, stepping back from a macro perspective, like anywhere in the United States or anywhere in the world, the ability to permit a project is always related to the local stakeholders' will to have that project hosted in their community. So if you look at California as a state, they've permitted 3 gold mines in the last 5 years: Sutter, Soledad Mountain, and Castle Mountain. Castle Mountain recently, I think 2 months ago now, went into commercial production with the Equinox Gold Company. That project was configured and permitted by a gentleman named Mark Leduc, and he is now the Chief Operating Officer of KORE. So we've got an experienced permitter and heap leach expert in our company to do our projects in California. Now, we are in a county in California called Imperial County, where we believe we have the support of the local people that'll take us through and support us through the permitting process. So you can get mines permitted in California. There are operating gold mines in California. And in fact, 9 miles away from our project in California, there's an operating heap leach cyanide using gold mine that has got a very good reputation in the community. So it's all about your local community social license to operate.
All right, well, that's sensible, and I understand what you're saying. On the other hand, as I understand it, you don't have drill permits for either of the projects, and this is just drilling, never mind production. Why is that taking so long? I remember seeing targets explained to me, I think maybe 2 years ago, but we're still waiting for drill permits. So how can I feel good about this as a potential investor?
Yeah, well, we only put our application in so let's talk about Imperial first. So we only put our application in for our Imperial permits 3 months ago. Now, the reason we only put it in there is because we did geophysics earlier this year after doing staking to get, basically 28 kilometers of strike. We had to pick where we wanted to put the drill pads. So we didn't want to go to the BLM too early with drill pads that we weren't going to use. So we've only been working for 3 months. We're doing a full plan operations. We have 150 pads in that plan of operations, even despite COVID, which admittedly has slowed down BLM bureaucracy. We're advancing and going through the NEPA, the National Environmental Process Environmental Assessment, and we do expect to have those permits in hand early Q2 of next year and to be drilling in late Q2 on that property. Up at the Long Valley project, our regulator is also a federal agency, but in this case is the U.S. Forest Service. Again, we've also only had that application in for about 3 months. We just got some good news yesterday on them and allowing us to use our independent consultants to complete the EA. That should accelerate because their staff tend to be slower when they do the work because COVID and it was a bad fire season. So the Forest Service was obviously quite busy. And again, we are expecting to have permits in hand in Q2. So that'll be overall a 6 to 8 month permitting program to get drill pads permitted.
Okay, well,
so I think the agencies are actually being quite cooperative.
Well, it'd be nice to see the boys in green at the Forestry Service be more cooperative. And if your permits have only been in for a few months, then that makes a lot more sense. But maybe I misunderstood. The last time I looked at the story, granted it was a while ago, but I was under the impression that you had drill targets at Imperial overlooked areas ready to go, and that you are hoping to get to drilling sooner.
Yeah, well, in early 2020, the plan was to be drilling in Q4 in California. Absolutely. Now at Imperial, we originally were applying for a small drill program, and they moved us from a notice of intent we wanted to drill under to a plan of operations. So that probably cost us 3 or 4 months. We probably should have gone in right away with a plan of operations, but so it was sort of we did go through 2 steps to get the current permit processing underway. Absolutely.
Well, at least the plan of operations will allow you to have more disturbance and get more work done. And you would have had to come back to it eventually anyway. So, I can.
Yeah. We tried the small program angle, and I guess there was an environmental area that overlapped some of the places we wanted to drill. So it sort of drove us into the PO. So when we put in the PO, we massively upsized the amount of pads because we're going to go through the full process. We want to have a lot, we want to have 2 years of drill pads. Yep.
All right. And well, I get several ways I could go with this, but since we're talking about drilling at Imperial, is the idea here to prove up your PEA to, is this engineering, or is it exploration, or both? What's the objective there?
Yeah, so it is both. So those pads should allow us to drill for several years. They include all the locations we would need to do any updated geotech, met, infill, testing underneath the deposit and testing on step outs from the deposit, as well as to go test some of our regional exploration targets, because we've been prospecting on the 15 kilometers of strike we have that leads up to the Mesquite mine up to the northeast. And so we've got a smattering of basically greenfield exploration targets out there, as well as I would call the engineering targets and drill pads over the actual project. Now, from our perspective, Imperial, the work done by Glamis on Imperial in the 1990s has really de-risked that project. So we don't feel, and we don't plan to do a PFS. We are permitting off our PEA mine plan. The technical work will just be to support financing and an ultimate feasibility study once we get further down the permitting track.
All right, sorry, just to be clear, you're not going to build the mine on a PEA. You're just going to skip the PFS and go straight to BFS. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. But it is, we got to be confident, because the PEA mine plan is what's going into the mine permitting, which is also underway with the BLM.
Understood. All right, well, let's talk about that a little bit. The study had an astoundingly high internal rate of return for, 0.59 grams per ton, even lower for the inferred. And now I guess you have new updated numbers for your PowerPoint based on higher gold prices. I understand that it's oxide, heap leach, low cost processing, but it still seems very high. What were the particular advantages of this project that made for such a high rate of return on, sorry, but it's not a high grade even for bulk tonnage standard deposits.
Yep. It's as simple as mining gets. The Mesquite employees drive on a paved road that comes within 3 miles of our deposit on their way to work. The power line that feeds Mesquite goes right over the property. Glamis drilled water wells and monitoring wells on the property back in the 90s that we've reopened and reaffirmed. So we have all of the infrastructure on the property for literally almost zero cost. So the only capital to put Imperial into production is buying a mine fleet and building a heap leach pad. And you obviously have to have your ADR plant, but that's like a $12 million packaged plant to pour the amount of gold we want to pour, and a couple trailers to get offices in place. It is as simple as mining gets, and that just leads to the low capital intensity. Now, it's not unprecedented low, because if you actually look at the cap intensity, even our own materials, we're only slightly under Integra up in Idaho. So, there's precedent that says this is an achievable capital cost.
Well, I certainly get that. If you could keep the CapEx low, then it's easier to boost the IRR. One question about this comes to mind. You mentioned the Mesquite mine, your neighbor's right there. If this is so obvious, if there's such high quality work left over from Glamis and the returns are so high, why haven't you been taken over yet?
It's a good question. Go ask Christian Malau. Now, no, that said, look, they've got a business plan that they're building a true. I think they would want to be what I would describe as a major gold company. I call it a mid-tier right now. They're what, a 3 or 4 billion market cap now after building out their asset base. I do believe at some point there is logic to using the great reputation that Mesquite has, the labor force they have to build a project like Imperial and extend their time in Imperial County. But we ultimately have to de-risk the project to a point where they would be comfortable moving on the company, or move the project on to another mid-tier, because there's not a ton of synergies in a heap leach. You can't truck ore, right? The ore can only be moved as far as you can get it past the lip of the drill pad onto the heap leach pad, as you said, because of the grade. So ultimately, the project could be purchased by any mid-tier looking for growth, although you're right, the logical would be Equinox.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, just one has to wonder, what do they know? And the Long Valley PEA, I'm not sure whether the Imperial one, I noticed that the IRR, but last time I looked, was 44%. Now on your PowerPoint is 42%. So I assume there's a different gold price assumption. And you've just come out with this PEA on the Long Valley project. And, again, super high IRR, but also, not super high grade. So is it a similar story where it's just very low capital requirements up front that produces that IRR?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the strip ratio at Long Valley is less than 1. So you do not have to buy a lot of mine fleet to move even material that's only at 0.65 grams. So it's about 10% higher grade than Imperial. The entire deposit is encapsulated in a very thin layer of gold over a wide area that's only about 90 meters deep. So really, you're mining off the surface material and you're putting waste back over your shoulder as part of your backfilling requirement. So again, it's a project that's close to all the infrastructure that you'd need. It's got water, and these simple heap leach projects. It's exactly why guys like Glamis and Royal Gold, who actually discovered Long Valley, were pursuing these projects, because gold was $350 when these guys were trying to build these projects. It's the only thing they could afford to do. They were left behind when gold went down to $250 and California passed the backfill law. Backfilling is now just a cost. So we can afford the cost of backfilling, which gives us also a strong social license to operate and allows these projects to once again, face development.
Right, understood on that. So let's talk about what costs we can afford for a moment. I noticed your PEA for Long Valley was the first one I've seen so far that has a $1,600 gold price assumption. Maybe somebody else has done it, but that's the first one I've seen. Even $1,500 makes me a little nervous. Where did you get that number? It seems higher than the 3-year trailing average.
Yeah, interesting. So ultimately that came from the engineers. Surprisingly, that wasn't management pushing a price on them. They use, the typical US way of calculating a number for an assessment. They use 2 years backward average price, and then the forward curve, and they average them, 60-40 or something, and they come up with a number. And they actually came up with 1650. And the reason that it moved because the same guys did the Imperial PEA, was simply that the forward price of gold had gone up dramatically in the 5 months between our two PEAs, driving that difference. So we took the engineers' recommendations ultimately. But if you look at we can make sure we include a sensitivity table in our PowerPoints. And if you use, most major gold companies now are making capital investments at $1,400 gold, $1,350 for forward planning, even to invest capital in existing mines. So at those numbers, we still have 800 million in NAV between the two projects. Imperial's a 40% IRR and Long Valley's a 30% IRR. So they're still strong projects at 1,400. Yeah. Ultimately, we make sure we provide the information. Investors can use whatever gold price they want. Core still looks cheap.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I must have missed that slide. So it's good to know at 1,400 you still have robust IRR. Sometimes when we have these conversations, I feel like a pirate. We're saying "I R" all the time. Sorry, I can only say those 3 letters so many times before that pops in my brain. Okay, so exactly. That's interesting. You know, we'll take you at your word that the engineers came up with that. That is interesting. I just, you know, even though these aren't, you know, 40-year mine lives, and I am bullish about gold going forward, that just seems really aggressive. So I'm glad it came from the engineers.
Yeah, certainly if you were a board making a capital decision today on investing in mine, you'd never use that long-term price, right? But, you know, these projects, so Imperial is 3 years from a construction decision, right? Long Valley's probably 5 years from a construction decision. Are we not going to see long-term gold price at that point when those decisions are made? Probably will. But anyways, you know, ultimately it's all about valuation metrics, and the market can use what gold price they want to value the company. And I think it'll look cheap in anybody's numbers.
Fair enough. No, I'm glad you include that price sensitivity table. I just missed it. So that's good to know that that's there for anybody that wants to look. I also noticed that there was talk about looking for the sulfides underneath the oxides at Long Valley in particular. You mentioned, I think, at Imperial as well just a moment ago, but I saw it on the PowerPoint at Long Valley, and I'm wondering, is there any drilling down below from the people who had it before so that you know it's there and what the kind of grade is, or is it just theoretical? Because there's plenty where the sulfides are not higher grade; it's the same, just different, you know, type of mineralization.
Yeah. So we'll start. So just to be clear, at Imperial is 100% oxidized. And that's actually why it's an interesting exploration opportunity, because Mesquite up the road, which is a total 9 million ounce series of deposits, ultimately moved from oxide into several other oxide ore bodies and down into sulfides. Imperial is 100% oxides. There's never been any sulfides found in any drilling. It's good because there's no rock drainage issues, but it makes you wonder where it came from, because its sulfide roots are somewhere, and hopefully there'd be more oxide. So that's kind of our exploration opportunity at Imperial.
Sorry, wait. Valley, Scott, let me just make sure I've got that clear. You're saying they've drilled underneath the oxides into fresh rock with no mineralization. So it's not just that they haven't drilled deep enough to find the sulfides, but they've looked and not found them. So it's just all oxide, no roots?
Correct.
Wow.
Yes. So has it been thrust faulted and moved off of the roots, and perhaps there's more oxide associated with that? Is it, where has the sulfides gone is a big question. So we've got some interesting geophysical anomalies that, could be those roots. We're going to be stepping out on strike as part of that drilling we're permitting, but it's a great exploration question. And, I obviously would like to find out with the drill where those are.
Oh, that's very interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And then stepping up to Long Valley. So Long Valley is very interesting because it is a textbook young epithermal gold system. So it is fully intact. You've got all evidence. In fact, 5 miles away, there's a geothermal plant because it's still hot as you go down into the ground in this site, because this system's probably still forming. So you've got this very, very thin veneer where the stuff's come to surface and oxidized. You've got a transition layer. And then when Royal Gold was drilling, as I talked about, we had that low gold price environment. They would typically have an RC rig with one geo. The geo saw sulfides in the core coming out, chips coming out of the ground, terminate hole, move. Don't care what the grade is. So we've got sulfide holes terminating in 3 grams per ton, but they just stopped drilling because they had absolutely no interest in penetrating those sulfides. So we ran a deep geophysics IP program earlier this year, trying to look at the fault structures and see where we could see. And the geophysics seemed to show very clearly interesting anomalies about where you would expect the feeder structures to be under this deposit, but they are completely untested by drilling. So this is a greenfield exploration opportunity that we've got good geophysics and good structural geology that says it could be there, but no one's ever put a hole in it. So you're right. Maybe you find nothing. Maybe you find some bonanza grades, like these systems have the capabilities. Ultimately, we're going to run a few of these step out holes from the oxides long and angle them down into those geophysics targets and see if there's anything down there.
All right. Okay. Well, that's it's not nothing. You did say that they were terminating holes in sulfides and sometimes 3 grams. So you do have some indications.
Yeah, like about 70% of the holes on the project terminate in sulfides. So there's sulfides there. You're right. It's what did they then, form into these tight feeder zones where you carry high grades? Because let's call a spade, you're only going to be interested in sulfides if they're really high grade and they're underground and you can dig them up and truck them to Nevada for processing. You're probably
But
not going to be able to sulfide
do
it
you
later.
do you have that old core? Because like if they didn't even bother sampling that because it wasn't what they were looking for, basically you would have somebody else's drilling would be like prospecting. Like each of those pierce points at the top, if they never sampled it, you could sample it and you would be sampling the top of the sulfide area and maybe be able to zero in on higher grade areas.
Yep, they typically assayed.
Oh, okay.
So we have assays, and they only did RC drilling. I think there's only 2 core holes for a bit of met on the entire project. So you don't get much what's left over from the chips and pulps in the RC. They used most of it for the samples. So yeah, there is some loss of history there. So I think we got to ultimately go drill underneath. We have some idea where the hot spots are from the grades. Like you can do a grade map at the bottom of the
Yeah,
holes and see.
that's what I was
Yeah,
suggesting.
yeah, correct. And that matches up well with some of these geophysic anomalies, as well as a lot of you can see all these silicified materials and alteration at the surface, and you can follow all these different indicators, but only the drill bit will tell.
Yeah, you didn't let the geophysicists see that map first, did you?
No, no, we did not.
All right. We won't beat up on our friends, the geophysicists, not too much. All right,
Yeah.
so I get it. Interesting propositions for both going forward. Let's talk about the Great White North. FG,
Yeah.
it's higher grade than either the California ones, but farther north, more expensive operating costs, presumably. So you've been drilling and and this is really, I think, what's got my readers asking. You've had some much higher grade drill results, 3 grams plus. But I'm looking at the cross sections in your press releases, and it looks like it's a deeper and a different thing. Are we looking at improving the average grade of the existing near surface resource, or are we looking at a new resource deeper underground?
Both, ultimately.
Okay, talk me through that. Help me understand.
Yeah, exactly. So, like a lot of deposits, we believe past operators of FG were drilling with, in their own time environment with the way they had raised capital in a certain assumption about the deposit. So FG Gold was actually drilled by earn-in partners to a company called Eureka Resources over 3 decades, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. They ended up putting over 600 holes in about a 3-kilometer long, 90-meter deep, what they believe bulk disseminated gold deposit. Right? That's a lot of holes. Like they were stepping out 10, 15 meters, drill, a mix of drill types, a little bit of narrow core, lots of RC, all angled through the bedding of a sediment rock unit that's hosting the gold, which you would normally do. And ultimately when that resource was calculated, at least in the most recent resource, you can see it came up with 1 million ounces or thereabouts of 0.8 grams. And quite frankly, let's call it. It's not economic in BC. I don't think anyone would ever build a mine in that. But Core came in with the theory that, look, when you go look at what limited core was done on the project, and it was known at the time, I won't completely throw these guys under the bus, they did a bulk underground sample. When you go in, this deposit is a structurally complex folded sedimentary rock unit with gold accumulated in the hinges and folds of this really messed up sedimentary layer, and it's complicated. It's also coarse gold, so you get all kinds of VG, you get large grain gold, and past operators used a lot of fire assaying, not many metallic screens, which you would normally use to properly assay for coarse gold. All of these factors go into the past the way that we think, look, they drilled the deposit with a different theory, and it was wrong. It's a complex, structurally controlled, nuggety ore body that needs a different geologic theory. So we went back in and we've been drilling our holes down plunge. So, the deposit bedding is sitting like this, instead of coming in this way and drilling against the theoretical bedding, which is all twisted up like this, we're going and drilling down the bedding through the known resource using metallic screens. We're using wide diameter core, taking big samples, and we're doing metallic screens on any anomalous gold. Okay. And what we're seeing is the highest grade intercepts ever. And even though there's 600 drill holes in this thing, we're finding higher grades than any of those guys found before, because metallic screening is properly measuring the amount of gold in this nuggety ore body. We're also using this wide diameter core to really understand the structural controls and how you find gold mineralization. Okay, so that's the upper part. We do believe there's an ore body that would be capable and have a high enough grade to carry potential underground mining. But obviously, we're only in the early stages of saying, does this new exploration theory actually work? And it seems to work. It's as much as we know right now.
Okay.
Now, the second theory was, okay, if this is really a structurally controlled deposit, do these structures and hinges and folds continue underneath where they've drilled before? Because of this bedding theory, they would drill this way, doop, 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 and their holes would get long and they'd stop. And they only penetrated 100 meters into the ore body. No one ever tipped the drill around and drilled down here and said, is there any gold deeper in this thing? And guess what? Core did that. And we hit 3.9 grams over 10 meters in what we first called the lower zone in our winter programs that came out earlier this year. And we said, okay, let's step out and go down further down that rock mass. And the hole we put out yesterday is 320 meters down dip from the bottom of that previous mineralization. And we hit 31 meters of 3.2 and I think 14 meters of over 6 grams, which you say, hey, that's potential underground grade material 300 meters underneath the deposit. And the strike of this thing's 3.5 kilometers. It's wide open on plunge down this sedimentary rock unit. There's a huge rock mass here that's now open for exploration to create an entirely new opportunity at the FG Gold Project.
Okay.
I almost went into one of those rambles you told me to do.
No, it's good.
It's a complicated geologic concept that we're trying to prove up with this relatively modest drilling. We only did 8 holes in the spring and 15 holes that are in the lab right now. One came out yesterday to say, look, does this theory hold? And if it holds, we got to go back and hit this thing hard with the drill next year and kind of windfall it,
Sure. All right. But it is two things happening, and which justifies your extra 10 minutes there or whatever. The drilling is the theory. It's not just geological theory. It is actual results. You're getting, with the metallic screen, you're getting higher grades within the known resource area. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
And so
Correct.
you would expect, even if it doesn't get any larger, you would expect the next resource estimate to come out at a higher average grade. Can you make that forward-looking statement?
No, I can't make that statement. We don't have enough density. It looks like that's possible. And on section, when you put the historic drill holes on that section around what we've drilled, it looks like it's showing higher grade. We don't have enough statistical evidence now, but yeah, that's our objective. We would like to come out with a deposit in that upper zone that's open pittable at a grade you'd expect would survive, a preliminary economic assessment. But again, we're just testing whether this looks like it's possible, because then you got to go raise money and do a bigger drill program to prove that statistically.
Right. Okay. And on the deeper target, 6 grams over 14 meters does start to look more underground friendly. 3 grams over, what was it? Larger
30.
space. That's a little bit more challenging for underground mining. But this is just the first couple holes here, right? So this is proof of concept, and then from here we go along strike to try to prove up a zone. All right. Well,
absolutely.
I noticed that you still had a pretty good bank account there, at least on your PowerPoint. They had about 10 million left in the bank, so you're not scraping the bottom of the barrel. But a bunch of deeper holes along 3 kilometers of strike is going to cost a lot of money. Do you have a budget for what it would take to prove up your thesis?
So at FG, so we think we've accomplished our goals for our modest program this year. We're right now permitting an area drill permit on the project for next year, which would allow us the flexibility to drill anywhere along that strike and step out in an area without having to permit and pick individual pads. So I think that's what we'd like to do next year. Next year in the drill season, we'd like to go in, and the board hasn't met to decide it, but we should be doing, if we're hitting this thing right, doing 10 to 30,000 meters in this project. I think that's what we're showing it deserves. And that's capital Core would have to raise to do that drilling. We do not have that capital in the company currently. But hopefully we can arm wave now and say, look, we've got something that, at the beginning of the year, people would have said, that thing's been drilled 3 times before. Who cares? It's junk.
600 holes
Right?
is
And
a lot of holes.
you got a real exploration opportunity here. Now, the last point I want to make around that is surrounding that exploration opportunity is 1,000 square kilometer land package that controls pretty much the whole South Caribou. And we're basically run our claims right up to the edge of a Cisco development, which is out there with $100 million drilling the crap out of the north part of the Caribou at Barkerville. So I think this district's going to attract a lot of attention. As the #2 guy in the district, I don't think capital is going to be a problem.
Drilling the crap out of it. That's a technical description there for the audience. I
That
like
seems
it.
to be their strategy. I mean, look what they did at Windfall when you got $100 million to drill. They're talking 10 drills. Like
Yeah, you
doing
have
crap.
to. I don't want to criticize anybody on but you have to wonder, how effectively can you.
It will attract attention. It's not necessarily what I would do, but it would attract attention.
Yeah. All right. I'll leave that be. All right. So, well, I hadn't intended to go there, but since you mentioned it, I will mention that we have a lot of readers who love private placements with nice terms. So if you ever get around to wanting a retail component in your next raise, let us know. Depending on the terms, maybe some of the readers will be interested. And I don't charge any finder's fees. I'm just here trying to find good information for my readers. But let's get back to what's happening now.
Yeah.
Next year, hopefully, COVID will be gone and everybody will be able to work the way we like to. But what's the news flow over the next quarter or two? Like if I'm thinking about buying your stock today, why would I want to buy it today and not wait for things to get going next year?
Yeah, good question. So, coming out of the company, we've got the other 14 holes from the FG drill program. The drill's actually still turning. It'll be generating 2,000 meters or thereabouts before Christmas at our second project on that Caribou land package called Gold Creek. Gold Creek is adjacent to Spanish Mountain. It's a discovery made in 2018. We're trying to expand and show scale for that project as well to create a second project in the district. I think our board at KORE is sitting down and considering, okay, let's step back and see what is KORE. Corehead is on the path to development at Imperial. We're permitting a mine. We're exploring around that mine at Imperial. We've got Long Valley where we want to go out and drill and grow it and sort of shore up that PEA because it does not have the same history as Imperial as far as technical work. And then we've got this big exploration play in BC next to what I think is going to be a big exploration play in BC in a Cisco development. So you got this area play with a project on it that's kind of exciting. But those three things are very different. And when you're buying KORE today, you're buying all three of those things. I think you will find sometime in 2021, the board is open to a transaction to find different pathways to value creation, either spinning the BC assets to our shareholders, merging them with another BC company so that you can get direct exposure to that exploration buzz in that BC project, as opposed to the pedantic de-risking and delivering of that to whatever you believe the NPV to be of those development projects in California.
Actually,
So
that was a question I had. Is if you, especially when you have one more advanced project, it's the typical question. Well, what about the rest of the assets? Are you getting any value for the rest of the assets, and does a spin out make sense?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. A portfolio is hard to value, and you probably will eventually attract different shareholders that want to fund excitement in BC versus de-risking in California. We've not tapped institutional markets at KORE yet because Eric Sprott's basically backed the company to date. So I think what you're buying at KORE is an undervalued story with three different assets that we have an entrepreneurial board and management that's going to do everything we can to get you the shareholder exposure to all three of those assets valuation.
All right. Well, not to be rude, but I gotta ask about that. I noticed on the PowerPoint it says no strategic investor. Well, if these assets are so great, why is there no strategic investor? Are the big boys trying to tell us something, or why is that?
I think it's like a lot of things with KORE, it's a matter of time. I mean, I bought my shares in this company and joined 15 months ago. We didn't have any money in the company nor a team to do anything until Eric came in August of last year. We delivered our first news release in January of this year. And we've only been showing people the market and waving our arms around this company now for this is month 10. Big companies just don't move that. They keep their eye on something for a couple of years and move on it. Do they know what KORE.V is and gold standard and all these things? They bought into Liberty, early on, probably, I think even before their current project, right? So KORE does not have a strategic investor. That's something we've had some approaches from some companies. We're open to CAs. It's a potential source of capital if markets are not cooperative and they're trying to gouge us for some, dilutive deal. I'm a shareholder of this company. I want to raise capital at the lowest cost of capital. If a mining company wants to come in at a premium and buy 9.9 of the company, it's something we'll consider. It's also, we've not opened up the share registered institutions. That's something else that I think KORE's got assets that will eventually attract that investment market. So there's a lot of things and a lot of maturing KORE has to do both on the capital market side and on knowledge of its assets.
All right, well, that does make sense. You mentioned that you bought your own shares. So you didn't just get handed a bunch of penny options when you were brought on board. I always like to ask our guests, the skin in the game question. If you want me to put my hard-earned money into your stock, how much of your own have you put in?
Let's see. That's actually a good question. So let's see, about 100,000 for. Oh, I guess I've probably bought in the last 12 months 400 or 500 grand worth of stock. I go check said I even bought another 20,000 shares at $1.06 last 2 weeks ago. Because the stock had this just lack of, it's not very liquid. So we get these sort of days it goes up and down, and we kind of drifted down to $1. I was like, this is crazy. So I bought some stock at $1.06, and I'm going to keep tossing money in whenever I hit dips, just like I think any good investor should.
All righty. Well, I appreciate your candor on that, and I respect the skin in the game. That's one of my main deal breakers, actually. So it's good to see. As I wrap up here, so we have drill results still pending. We have,
correct.
And then, even with winter coming, we have potentially permitting news in California. And
correct.
Then next year we have, sorry?
Yeah, we also have prospecting coming out of Imperial. We've been in the field honing up our targets for the regional drilling there. So we'll see a news release on that before Christmas as well.
Right. Okay. And then next year, hopefully, based on the results this year, we'll have big things happening up in BC and things starting to happen at long last in California. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
2021's, we've set up the company, we've kind of, through staking and doing work, we got 3 assets that are kind of ready to go here. We just got to get them rolling down the hills at high speed here. Okay.
Well, keep us posted. It's very interesting. Actually,
okay.
You've done a good job. I understand, I think, much better than I did before this conversation. You've succeeded in putting this on my radar, and make sure that we get your press releases, and good luck with it.
Will do. Thank you very much, Lobo, for having me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for watching this edition of In the Pit with Lobo Tigre. If you enjoyed or found value in what you just saw, and you're watching this on any sort of social media, please do hit the like button and the share link. Send this on to anybody you think might be interested. That helps us out a lot. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button as well. The number of subscribers helps us get more valuable content to you as well. On the subject of subscribing, I'll quickly say that if you're not a subscriber to our free weekly Speculators Digest, I encourage you to sign up. I promise if you do, we will not send you a flood of daily advertisements. You get one free weekly digest with original research not published anywhere else. Check it out at independentspeculator.com. Thank you and have a great day.